She swore she'd never come back. Not to this city, not to these people. But 5 years changes everything, especially when the thing you ran from looks exactly like you. The champagne glasses shattered before anyone screamed. His fiancée's face twisted, not with jealousy, with recognition, because the child standing in the marble hall wasn't just any boy. He was a mirror, and mirrors don't lie. Cut to black. Some secrets don't stay buried. They grow up. Ji-yeon stood at the entrance of the Seongnam Grand Ballroom, her black dress clinging to her frame like a second skin she hadn't worn in years. The marble beneath her heels was cold, colder than she remembered, colder than the night she'd left this world behind. 6 years. 6 years since she'd walked through doors like these. 6 years since she'd breathed air thick with money, power, and the kind of silence that only came when everyone in the room had blood on their hands. Her son's hand squeezed hers. "Yama," Minjun whispered, his dark eyes wide as he stared at the crystal chandeliers that dripped from the ceiling like frozen tears. "It's so shiny." She didn't answer. Couldn't. Because across the room, through the sea of tailored suits and designer gowns, she saw him. Kang Tae-hyun, 32 now. Still broad-shouldered. Still carved from stone and silence. His jaw was sharper than she remembered. His hair slicked back in that way that made him look both dangerous and untouchable. He stood beside a woman. Younger. Thinner, draped in white silk that probably cost more than Ji-yeon's entire year of rent. His fiancée, Seo-hana. The name had been plastered across every tabloid, every gossip site, every whispered conversation in the underground circles Ji-yeon had tried so desperately to leave behind. 27 years old, daughter of a rival family, a merger marriage, the kind that ended wars, or started them. Hana's laugh cut through the room like glass, high, sharp, performative. Ji-yeon felt Minjun tug at her hand again. "Why are we here?" he asked, his voice small. Why? Because running had an expiration date. Because secrets didn't stay buried when they had his father's eyes. Because Ji-yeon had spent 5 years building a life in Busan, working double shifts at a convenience store, lying to her son every time he asked why he didn't have a daddy like the other kids. And because 3 days ago, she'd received an envelope. No return address. Just a photo. Tae-hyun, Hana. A wedding invitation for a date 2 months away. And underneath, in handwriting she didn't recognize, "He deserves to know. Stay close to me," Ji-yeon murmured, pulling Minjun tighter against her side. She moved through the crowd like a ghost. No one looked at her. Not really. She was dressed well enough to blend in, invisible enough to be dismissed. Just another face in a sea of calculated smiles and strategic alliances. Until Hana saw her. It happened fast. Too fast for Ji-yeon to retreat. Hana's champagne glass paused halfway to her lips. Her gaze locked onto Ji-yeon, scanning her from head to toe with the kind of assessment that came from years of being trained to identify threats. And then she smiled. "You," Hana said, her voice carrying just enough to draw attention. "Come here." Ji-yeon's blood turned to ice. Tae-hyun turned. His eyes, God, those eyes, landed on her. For a moment there was nothing. No recognition. No flicker of memory. Just the cold, measured stare of a man who'd learned to read people the way other men read contracts. And then something shifted. His jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. But Ji-yeon had memorized that face once, traced its lines with her fingertips in darkness, and she saw it, the crack in his armor. "Do I know you?" Hana asked, stepping forward. Her heels clicked against the marble with military precision. "No," Ji-yeon said quietly. "I don't think so." "Funny." Hana tilted her head, her smile widening. "Because you look like someone who doesn't belong here." The room seemed to shrink. Several heads turned now, sensing blood in the water. "I was just leaving," Ji-yeon managed, turning slightly. "Oh, I don't think so." Hana's voice dropped, sweet as poisoned honey. "See, this is my engagement party, and I have a thing about uninvited guests." Tae-hyun stepped forward. "Hana, no, it's fine, Oppa." Hana's hand landed on his arm, possessive and final. She turned back to Ji-yeon, eyes glittering. "You came all this way. The least you can do is show some respect." Ji-yeon's throat closed. "Bow," Hana said simply. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "What?" Ji-yeon breathed. "You heard me." Hana's smile never wavered. "Bow. To me. To us. Show everyone here that you understand your place." Minjun's hand tightened in hers. Ji-yeon could feel his confusion, his fear radiating through his small palm. Tae-hyun's face was unreadable, but he didn't stop her. Didn't say a word. The silence stretched. Ji-yeon's knees trembled. Every instinct screamed at her to grab Minjun and run. But she'd come here for a reason, and running had only delayed the inevitable. Slowly, keeping her eyes on Hana's triumphant face, Ji-yeon began to lower herself, her knees bent. The room watched. Hana's smile grew, and then Minjun spoke. "Yama," he said, loud enough for several people to hear. "Why is that man staring at us?" Ji-yeon's heart stopped. Minjun wasn't looking at Hana. He was looking at Taehyun. "He looks like me," Minjun continued, his child's voice cutting through the tension like a knife through silk. "Doesn't he, Yama? He has my nose." The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was apocalyptic. Hana's smile cracked. Her gaze snapped from Ji-yeon to Minjun, really seeing him for the first time, seeing the dark hair, the sharp features, the unmistakable structure of his face. Taehyun went completely still. "What?" Hana started. Ji-yeon straightened, fast. Her hand clamped over Minjun's mouth, but it was too late. Everyone was staring now. Not at her, at the boy, at the 5-year-old child who looked like a miniature version of Kang Taehyun. "Excuse us," Ji-yeon whispered, pulling Minjun back. "Wait." Taehyun's voice, deep, sharp, a command that had probably never been disobeyed. But Ji-yeon didn't stop. She turned, dragging Minjun through the crowd, ignoring his protests, ignoring the whispers that erupted behind her like wildfire. She made it to the hallway, made it past the marble columns and the flower arrangements that cost more than her monthly salary, made it exactly 10 steps before Taehyun's hand locked around her wrist. "Don't," he said. Just that, one word, but it carried 6 years of silence, of questions, of a night that had ended with her disappearing into the rain. Ji-yeon stopped. She didn't turn around. "Let go," she whispered. "Look at me. I can't." Ji-yeon. Her name in his mouth sounded wrong, foreign, like he'd been practicing it in his mind for years and still hadn't gotten it right. She turned. His face was inches from hers. Up close she could see everything. The new scar above his left eyebrow, the lines at the corners of his eyes that hadn't been there before, the way his pupils dilated when he finally, truly, looked at Minjun. "How old is he?" Taehyun asked. His voice was steady, too steady. 5, Ji-yeon said. "He just turned 5. The math was simple. Brutal. Taehyun's jaw worked. "Is he?" "Yes." The word came out broken. Behind them, footsteps, sharp, angry. Hana appeared in the doorway, her white dress now looking less like wedding silk and more like war paint. "Taehyun," she said, her voice razor thin. "We need to talk." But Taehyun didn't look at her. He was still staring at Minjun, who had gone quiet, sensing the storm building around him. "Not now," Taehyun said. "Not." Hana's voice rose. "Do you see what's happening? Do you understand what this looks like?" "I said not now." The command in his voice was absolute. Hana flinched, but she didn't leave. Instead, she turned to Ji-yeon, her face twisted with something beyond rage, something that looked almost like fear. "Who are you?" Hana demanded. Ji-yeon met her eyes. No one doesn't have his child. Don't lie to me," Hana's voice cracked. "I know what I'm looking at. Everyone in that room knows what they just saw." Taehyun's hand hadn't left Ji-yeon's wrist. If anything, his grip had tightened. "Hana," he said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "Go back inside." "I will not." "Now." The word was final. Absolute. Hana's face went white. For a moment, Ji-yeon thought she might actually slap him. But then something in her seemed to collapse, and she turned on her heel, her dress whispering against the marble as she disappeared back into the ballroom, leaving them alone. Taehyun, Ji-yeon, and the 5-year-old boy who looked exactly like him. "Where have you been?" Taehyun asked quietly. "Busan. For 6 years." "Yes. Why?" Ji-yeon finally pulled her wrist free. "Because you were getting married." The lie tasted like ash. But the truth, the real truth, was worse. 6 years ago, she'd left because staying meant becoming someone's mistress permanently, someone's secret, someone's liability. She'd left because she was 22 and pregnant and terrified. She'd left because loving Kang Taehyun was the most dangerous thing she'd ever done. "I was engaged to someone else," Taehyun said. 6 years ago, that engagement ended. "I know. So you've been keeping track." "No." Another lie. I needed to disappear." "And him?" Taehyun's gaze dropped to Minjun again. "You just decided I didn't deserve to know?" The accusation in his voice cut deeper than any knife. "You didn't want children," Ji-yeon said. "You told me that. The night we... Don't. You said your world was no place for a child. You said..." "I know what I said." Taehyun's voice was raw now. "But that doesn't mean..." He stopped, jaw clenched, fighting for control. Minjun tugged at Ji-yeon's dress. "Yama, I'm tired." "I know, baby," Ji-yeon whispered, smoothing his hair. "We're leaving." "No." Taehyun stepped in front of her. blocking the exit. You're not. You can't stop me. Can I? The threat wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Kang Tae-hyun ran the largest criminal network in Seoul. He could stop her with a single phone call, could make her disappear with a word, could take Min-jun with even less effort. What do you want? Ji-yeon asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Tae-hyun looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since she'd walked into that ballroom, she saw something other than ice in his eyes. She saw the boy he'd been, before the empire, before the blood, before everything that had turned him into this. I want the truth, he said. All of it. And then, his gaze drifted back to Min-jun. And then we figure out what happens next. Ji-yeon wanted to argue, wanted to scream that there was no we, that she'd spent 5 years making sure there was no next, that walking back into his world now meant sacrificing everything she'd built. But Min-jun was watching Tae-hyun with wide, curious eyes. And somewhere in the ballroom behind them, a party was falling apart. The consequence had already happened. Now came the reckoning. Tomorrow, Ji-yeon said. Not here. Not like this. Tae-hyun studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, typed something, and showed her the screen. An address, time, date. Don't make me come find you, he said quietly. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Ji-yeon took Min-jun's hand and walked past him, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might shatter her ribs. She didn't look back, but she felt his eyes on her all the way to the exit. Behind her she heard glass breaking, raised voices, the sound of an engagement party imploding. Min-jun looked up at her. Iyama? Who was that man? Ji-yeon kept walking. Someone from before, she whispered. Before what? Before everything. Before you. Before I knew what it meant to choose between love and survival. Before we went to Busan, she said instead. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. And as they stepped into the Seoul night, Ji-yeon realized that the distance between those two things had just collapsed. The apartment in Busan was small, not dangerously small, not the kind that spoke of real poverty, but small in the way that said careful, measured, temporary. Ji-yeon had never let herself believe it was permanent. Now, standing in the doorway at 2 a.m. with Min-jun asleep in her arms, she understood why. Some part of her had always known this day would come. The day when Seoul reached out with bloody hands and pulled her back. She laid Min-jun on his bed, the one with the racing car sheets he'd picked out himself, and watched his chest rise and fall, innocent, unaware. For 5 years, she'd protected him from the truth. 5 years of telling him his father was far away. 5 years of deflecting questions about family photos that didn't exist. 5 years of building a life so ordinary, so unremarkable, that no one would ever think to look twice at the single mother working checkout shifts at the GS25 on Haeundae Beach. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She already knew who it was. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Don't be late. T.H. Her hands shook as she typed back. I'll be there. 3 words. An entire life unraveling. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat at her kitchen table, the one she'd bought secondhand from a kind Ajuma who'd asked no questions, and did something she hadn't done in 6 years. She opened the box. It was small, metal, hidden in the back of her closet beneath winter coats she never wore, because Busan winters were mild, and forgetting Seoul was easier when you didn't keep anything that reminded you of cold. Inside, a single photograph, her, 22 years old, wearing a red dress she'd borrowed from her roommate, laughing at something off camera, her hand reaching toward someone just outside the frame. Taehyun had taken the photo. She remembered because he'd insisted, even though photographs were dangerous in his world. Evidence. Liability. But for one night, one single night, he'd wanted something to remember her by. She'd left it behind when she ran, but somehow it had found its way into her bag anyway. She'd discovered it 3 days later, tucked between her clothes like a ghost's calling card. She'd almost burned it. Should have burned it. Instead, she'd put it in a box and tried to forget it existed. Now, staring at that girl's face, the one who thought loving a mafia boss was romantic instead of suicidal, Ji-yeon felt something crack inside her chest. That girl was dead. She'd died the moment she'd seen the positive pregnancy test. Died again when she'd realized Taehyun's engagement announcement wasn't a mistake. Died a final time when she'd boarded the train to Busan with nothing but a backpack and a future that suddenly included someone other than herself. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a different number. This is Hana. We need to talk, before you see him. Ji-yeon stared at the message for a full minute. Then she blocked the number. Whatever Hana wanted to say, Ji-yeon didn't need to hear it. The woman had humiliated her in front of a room full of predators, had demanded she bow like a servant, like nothing. If Hana thought they had anything to discuss, she was more delusional than dangerous. But the message rattled her anyway, because Hana knew something. Something that made her desperate enough to reach out directly instead of going through Tae-hyun. Ji-yeon closed her eyes. 6 years ago, when she'd left, she'd made a choice. Protect Min-jun at all costs. Keep him away from that world. Raise him somewhere he could be normal. Safe, but safety was an illusion. She'd learned that the hard way. The address Tae-hyun had given her wasn't what she'd expected. Not his penthouse in Gangnam. Not the nightclub he supposedly used as a front. Not even one of the high-security offices where he conducted business that never made it into legal documents. Instead, a tea house in Insadong. Traditional, quiet. The kind of place tourists visited to feel cultured and locals avoided because the tea costs 3 times what it should. Ji-yeon arrived at 1:55 p.m., 5 minutes early. A habit from her old life. Always arrive before the boss. Always be prepared to leave if things went wrong. Min-jun wasn't with her.
Before you continue, if this story touched something in you, you should know this is only the beginning. The complete version includes 30 full audio stories, more than 30 hours of uninterrupted listening. No ads, no cuts, no distractions. Scan the QR code on your screen, or tap the link in the pinned comment to continue listening right now.
She'd left him with Mrs. Park, the elderly neighbor who sometimes watched him when Ji-yeon had late shifts. Mrs. Park had asked no questions when Ji-yeon showed up at her door that morning, pale and shaking, asking if she could keep Min-jun for the day. Trouble with a man? Mrs. Park had asked, knowing without needing to be told. Something like that, Ji-yeon had whispered. Now, sitting in a private room overlooking a garden she couldn't appreciate, Ji-yeon waited. The door opened at exactly 2 p.m. Tae-hyun entered alone. He'd changed since last night. The tailored suit was gone, replaced by dark jeans and a black sweater that somehow made him look more dangerous instead of less. His hair was unstyled, falling slightly into his eyes. He looked tired, human. The illusion lasted exactly 3 seconds. "You came," he said, sitting across from her without ceremony. "You didn't give me a choice. There's always a choice." He poured tea. Green, fragrant. Too expensive to taste like anything but obligation. "You made yours 6 years ago." The accusation hung between them. "You were engaged," Ji-yeon said quietly, "to Park Min-seo, daughter of the Incheon family. A merger marriage to expand your territory into the ports." Tae-hyun's hand stilled on the teapot. "You did keep track. I needed to know if you'd come looking for me." "I did." The admission caught her off guard. "What?" "I looked for you." His eyes met hers, and for the first time since the ballroom, she saw something other than ice. "For 3 months. I had people searching every district in Seoul, every train station, every bus terminal. You vanished. I had to. Why? Because I was pregnant." The words tore out of her, sharp and raw. "Because I was 22 years old and carrying the child of a man who told me explicitly that his world had no place for children. Because your fiancé's family had a reputation for dealing with complications permanently. Because I was terrified." Tae-hyun's jaw worked. "I would have protected you." "How?" Ji-yeon leaned forward. "By making me your mistress officially? By setting me up in some apartment where I'd wait for you to visit between business meetings and family obligations. By letting Min-jun grow up knowing his father was a criminal who couldn't acknowledge him publicly. That engagement ended. I know. I read about it. 2 months after I left, Park Min-seo was found dead. Suicide, the papers said. But we both know what that means." Tae-hyun went very still. "Are you accusing me of something?" "No." Ji-yeon's voice dropped. "I'm stating a fact. Your world kills people, Tae-hyun. It killed her. It would have killed me. And it sure as hell would have destroyed Min-jun. So you ran. So I survived." The silence stretched. Outside, someone laughed. A tourist, probably, delighted by the koi pond or the carefully manicured moss. Inside this room, 2 people sat across from each other and calculated the cost of truth. "His name is Min-jun," Tae-hyun said finally. "You named him after my brother." Ji-yeon hadn't expected him to notice that. "Your brother was kind to me. Once. He's dead now." "I know." Another headline she'd read. Another funeral she'd watched from a distance. "I'm sorry." "Are you?" Tae-hyun's voice was flat. "Sorry enough to let me know I had a son? Sorry enough to give me a choice in whether I wanted to be a father? You didn't want to be a father. I didn't want to bring a child into this life. There's a difference." "Is there?" Tae-hyun stood abruptly, paced to the window, stared out at the garden with his hands clenched behind his back. "I'm 32 years old," he said quietly. "I run an organization with over 300 active members. I've been shot twice. Stabbed once. Poisoned once. Though that was more of a warning than a real attempt. My enemies number in the dozens. My allies are worse than my enemies because at least my enemies are honest about wanting me dead. He turned. And in all of that, in 15 years of this life, I have never lied to anyone about who I am or what I'm capable of. I didn't lie. You disappeared with my child. His voice cracked. Just slightly. Just enough. You took him from me before I even knew he existed. You made that choice for me. So don't talk to me about protection, Ji-yeon. Don't pretend this was about keeping him safe. It was. No. Taehyun moved closer. It was about keeping you safe. From commitment. From complication. From having to actually trust me. The words hit like physical blows. Because they were true. At least partially. I was 22. Ji-yeon whispered. I was terrified. You were engaged to someone else. What was I supposed to do? Tell me. So you could what? Cancel your wedding? Abandon your family's alliance? Risk a war over some girl you'd slept with a handful of times? Yes. The single word dropped between them like a bomb. Ji-yeon stared at him. What? Yes, Taehyun repeated. I would have canceled everything. I would have dealt with the consequences. I would have... He stopped. Jaw clenched. It doesn't matter now. But it did matter. Because Ji-yeon was realizing, 6 years too late, that maybe she'd been wrong. Maybe the man standing in front of her wasn't the same one who'd told her that children were liabilities. Maybe something had changed. Or maybe she'd never really known him at all. What do you want from me? She asked. Access. To Minjun? To my son. Yes. Taehyun's voice was firm. Final. I want to know him. I want him to know me. I want to be part of his life. In what capacity? In whatever capacity he'll accept. And if he's afraid of you, then I'll wait. Taehyun sat back down. I'm good at waiting, Ji-yeon. I waited 3 months for you to come back before I gave up. I can wait for my son to trust me. Ji-yeon's hands trembled around her teacup. And Hana? His expression darkened. What about her? She's your fiancé. How do you think she's going to react to suddenly having a 5-year-old stepson? That's my problem. It's Minjun's problem if she decides he's a threat to her position. Hana wouldn't... Taehyun stopped. Something flickered across his face. Doubt. I'll handle it. How? That's not your concern. It is if it affects my son. Our son. The correction was sharp, possessive. Ji-yeon felt the trap closing around her. You can't just claim him because it's convenient. Convenient? Taehyun's laugh was bitter. You think any of this is convenient? My engagement is falling apart. My reputation is being questioned. There are already whispers in the family about my ability to lead if I couldn't even keep track of my own child. Convenient doesn't begin to cover what you've done. What I've done? You showed up at my engagement party with a child who looks exactly like me. You let him speak in front of witnesses. You've ensured that by tomorrow morning, every organization from Busan to Pyongyang will know that Kang Taehyun has a bastard son. The word hit her like a slap. Don't call him that. That's what they'll call him. Taehyun leaned forward. And they'll call you worse. His mistress. His mistake. The woman who tried to trap him with a child. I know you didn't. But they don't know that. And perception is reality in my world. Ji-yeon felt tears burning behind her eyes. She refused to let them fall. So what do you suggest? Taehyun was quiet for a long moment. Marry me, he said. The room tilted. What? Marry me. His voice was steady, calm, as if he was proposing a business merger instead of a life. Legitimize Minjun. Give him my name. Make this official. You're already engaged. Not for long. You can't just... I can do whatever I want. His eyes were hard now. That's what being in charge means, Ji-yeon. I decide. And I've decided that my son doesn't grow up as anyone's bastard. He deserves better. He deserves better than a father who's only marrying his mother to save face. Maybe. Taehyun stood. But he also deserves better than a mother who kept him hidden like a shameful secret. The words cut deeper because they were true. Ji-yeon stood as well. I'm not marrying you. Then what? I don't know. She grabbed her purse. But not that. Not a marriage built on obligation and damage control. It doesn't have to be like that. Yes, it does. She moved toward the door. Because you don't love me, Taehyun. You never did. I was just convenient. Available. And now Minjun is your responsibility. But I'm not going to pretend we're some happy family because it makes the syndicate gossip easier to manage. She reached for the door handle. His hand caught her wrist. Again. Let go, she whispered. You're wrong. About what? About me not loving you. Ji-yeon froze. Taehyun's grip loosened. His thumb brushed across her pulse point. Once, gently. A gesture so familiar it hurt. I loved you 6 years ago, he said quietly. I loved you enough to let you go when you disappeared, because I thought maybe you'd found something better. Someone better. Somewhere safe. Tae-hyun, I'm not asking you to marry me because of damage control, Jiyeon. I'm asking because I've spent 6 years trying to forget you and failing. Because seeing you last night with our son made me realize that everything I've built means nothing if they're not part of it. Because he stopped, released her wrist. Because I don't want to wait another 6 years to see if you'll come back. Jiyeon's breath caught. For 6 years, she'd told herself that running was the right choice. That Tae-hyun had never really cared. That their nights together were just physical, transactional. But standing here, seeing the exhaustion in his eyes, the way his shoulders sagged just slightly, she wondered if she'd been lying to herself. I need time, she whispered. How much? I don't know. Tae-hyun nodded slowly. Then let me see him. Tomorrow. Let me meet my son properly. Not in a hallway, not in crisis. Just let me know him. It wasn't a request, but it wasn't quite a command either. Jiyeon thought about Min-jun, about the questions he'd asked in the car last night, about the way he'd stared at Tae-hyun with curiosity instead of fear. He doesn't know, she said. About you. I haven't told him. Then we tell him together. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that his father is a criminal? You don't use the word criminal. Tae-hyun's voice was wry. You use businessman. Despite everything, Jiyeon almost smiled. Almost. Tomorrow, she agreed. But on my terms. In Busan. At my apartment. Neutral ground. Busan isn't neutral. It's your territory. Exactly. Tae-hyun studied her, then nodded. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Send me the address. Jiyeon opened the door. Jiyeon. She paused. Thank you, Tae-hyun said quietly. For keeping him safe. For raising him. For doing it alone when you shouldn't have had to. The gratitude in his voice broke something inside her. She left before he could see her cry. Her phone buzzed 3 times on the train back to Busan. The first message, I'm canceling the engagement. TH. The second, whatever happens with us, I won't let Min-jun suffer for our mistakes. TH. The third was from the blocked number. Hana had found a new way to reach her. He's lying to you. Ask him about the debt. Ask him what your father owed. Jiyeon stared at the message for 10 minutes straight. Then she turned off her phone, because some truths were too dangerous to face all at once. And she had a feeling that tomorrow, when Tae-hyun met his son, the lies she'd built her life on were about to come crashing down. Jiyeon didn't sleep again. Instead, she spent the night cleaning her apartment with the kind of manic energy that came from knowing tomorrow would change everything. She scrubbed the kitchen counters 3 times, reorganized Min-jun's toy shelf, folded and refolded the laundry until her hands ached. At 3 a.m. she finally stopped, sat on the floor of her living room, stared at nothing. Ask him about the debt. Hana's message burned in her mind like acid. She tried to ignore it, tried to pretend that whatever game Hana was playing didn't matter, but the words kept circling back, insistent and sharp. Ask him what your father owed. Jiyeon's father had been a gambler. That much she'd known. That much everyone in their neighborhood had known. Kim Jae-won, the man who'd disappear for days at a time, who'd come home smelling like soju and cigarettes and bad decisions, who'd died when Jiyeon was 19, leaving behind nothing but debts she couldn't pay, and a mother who'd stopped speaking the day they found his body in the Han River. A suicide, the police had said. Guilt over the money he owed. Jiyeon had been relieved when her mother passed 2 years later. Relieved that she wouldn't have to watch the empty-eyed woman waste away anymore. Relieved that she was finally, truly alone. But now Hana's message made her wonder, had her father's death really been a suicide? And if not, who had he owed? She grabbed her phone, turned it on despite every instinct screaming at her to leave it off. Search for something she should have searched for years ago. Kim Jae-won Gambling Debts 2019. The results were sparse. A few local news articles about illegal gambling rings being busted. Nothing specific. Nothing that mentioned her father by name. But then she refined the search. Kim Jae-won Han River Death, Kang Family 1 result. A single forum post from 6 years ago. Barely indexed. Probably deleted within hours of being posted. Anyone know what happened with the Kim guy who owed money to the Kang organization? Heard he turned up dead before he could pay back. Heard they sent someone to collect from his family after. Messy business. Jiyeon's hands went numb. Sent someone to collect from his family. 6 years ago. Right before she'd met Tae-hyun. Right before everything. No, it couldn't. Her phone slipped from her fingers. Because suddenly she was remembering the night they'd met. The club in Itaewon. The way Tae-hyun had appeared out of nowhere when 2 drunk men had cornered her outside. The way he'd scared them off with nothing but a look. The way he'd offered to buy her a drink. To make sure she got home safely. She'd thought it was chance. Coincidence. A dangerous man with a soft spot for girls who looked lost. But what if it wasn't? What if he'd been there looking for her? What if everything had been orchestrated? The room spun. Ji-yeon forced herself to breathe, to think. It didn't make sense. If Taehyun had been sent to collect a debt from her, why would he have pursued her romantically? Why would he have spent months courting her carefully, taking her to late-night diners, teaching her how to play Go, making her laugh when she'd forgotten how? Unless the debt wasn't money. Unless what her father owed was something else entirely. No, she couldn't think like this. Couldn't let Hana's poison seep into her mind. Hana had every reason to lie, to manipulate, to destroy whatever fragile truce Ji-yeon and Taehyun might build. This was a game, and Ji-yeon refused to play. She turned off the phone, again, and waited for morning. Taehyun arrived at exactly 10 a.m. He knocked 3 times, measured, polite, and when Ji-yeon opened the door, she found him standing in her hallway, looking profoundly out of place. His clothes were expensive but understated. His car, parked in her apartment complex's tiny lot, was a black sedan that probably cost more than every vehicle in the neighborhood combined. He looked like money. She looked like survival. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. Taehyun entered slowly, taking in the space the way someone might assess a potential threat. His eyes catalogued everything. The secondhand furniture, the crayon drawings on the refrigerator, the single photo frame on the wall showing Ji-yeon and Min-jun at Haeundae Beach. "Nice place," he said. It wasn't. They both knew it wasn't. But the lie was kind. "Min-jun is in his room," Ji-yeon said. "I told him someone was coming to visit. I didn't tell him who. How do you want to do this?" "I don't know." Ji-yeon leaned against the kitchen counter. "I've never had to explain to my son that his father is alive and wants to meet him." "You told him I was dead?" "I told him you were far away." He stopped asking questions after a while. Taehyun's jaw tightened. But he didn't argue. "Should I wait here?" "No." Ji-yeon pushed off the counter. "Come with me." They walked down the short hallway together, so close their shoulders almost brushed. Ji-yeon knocked on Min-jun's door. "Come in, Yama." She opened the door. Min-jun was sitting on his floor, surrounded by Lego bricks. He'd been building something elaborate, a spaceship maybe, or a fortress. When he saw Taehyun, he froze. "Hi," Taehyun said quietly. Min-jun stared at him with wide eyes. "You're the man from the fancy place." "I am. Why are you here?" Taehyun looked at Ji-yeon. She nodded. He sat down on the floor, carefully, slowly, and met Min-jun at eye level. "I'm here because I wanted to meet you properly." "Why?" "Because." Taehyun hesitated. "Because I'm your father." The words hung in the air. Min-jun blinked. Once, twice. Then he turned to Ji-yeon. "Yama?" "It's true," Ji-yeon said softly. She sat down too, completing a small circle on the floor. "This is your father, Min-jun. His name is Kang Taehyun." Min-jun looked between them, processing. "But you said he was far away." "I did, and I'm sorry I lied to you." "Why did you lie?" "Because the truth was dangerous. Because loving your father meant loving someone who lived in darkness. Because I was trying to protect you from a world that destroys everything it touches. Because I was scared," Ji-yeon said instead. Min-jun considered this. Then he looked at Taehyun. "Are you scary?" "Sometimes," Taehyun admitted. "But not to you. Never to you." "Do you live in the fancy place?" "I live in Seoul. It's a big city, about 4 hours from here." "That's not far away." "No, it's not." Min-jun went back to his Legos, started assembling pieces with the kind of focus only children possessed. "Can you build?" Taehyun glanced at the mess of bricks. "I can try." "Okay, help me make the wings." And just like that, the conversation shifted. No more questions about fathers or lies or why things were the way they were. Just a 5-year-old boy showing a stranger, his father, how to connect plastic bricks. Ji-yeon watched them work together, watched Min-jun explain his vision with animated gestures, watched Taehyun listen with the kind of serious attention he probably used in business meetings, watched her son's face light up when Taehyun successfully attached a wing without breaking the ship. "You're good at this," Min-jun declared. "I used to build things when I was your age," Taehyun said. "What kind of things?" "Models. Cars, mostly. My brother and I would have competitions to see who could build the fastest one." "You have a brother?" "I did. He's gone now." "Like how Iyama's parents are gone?" Taehyun's eyes met Ji-yeon's across the room. "Yes, like that." Min-jun nodded sagely. "That's sad." "It is. But now you have me." The statement was so simple, so pure. Taehyun's composure cracked. Just for a second. Just enough. "Yes," he said, his voice rougher than before. "Now I have you." They built for another hour. Ji-yeon stayed in the doorway, watching this impossible scene unfold. Her son and his father, together, building something out of pieces that shouldn't fit but somehow did. When the spaceship was finished, Minjun insisted on showing Taehyun his other toys, his books, his drawing of a whale he'd seen at the aquarium. Taehyun accepted each offering with the gravity it deserved, asking questions, praising effort, acting like a parent even though he'd only known his son existed for less than 24 hours. Eventually, Minjun yawned. "Nap time," Jiyeon announced. "But," Minjun protested. "No buts. You can play more later. Will he be here later?" Minjun looked at Taehyun hopefully. Taehyun glanced at Jiyeon. "If your Iyama says it's okay." "Please, Iyama." Jiyeon's throat tightened. "We'll see." She ushered Minjun into bed, tucked him in, kissed his forehead. By the time she came back out, Taehyun was standing in the living room, staring at that single photo on the wall. "He's incredible," Taehyun said without turning around. "He is. You did that. You raised him to be kind and curious and fearless. You did that alone. I didn't have a choice. You did." Taehyun finally turned. "You could have given him up. Could have decided this life was too hard, but you didn't." Jiyeon wrapped her arms around herself. "What did you expect? For me to abandon my child because his father wasn't around? Some people would have. I'm not some people." "No." Taehyun moved closer. "You're not." They stood in her small living room, this space she'd built from nothing, and looked at each other. "I need to ask you something," Jiyeon said. "Ask. Did you know who I was? When we met? Did you know about my father?" Taehyun went very still. That was answer enough. "You did." Jiyeon's voice broke. "You knew." "Yes." The confirmation hit her like a physical blow. "What did he owe you?" she whispered. "My father." "What was the debt?" Taehyun's silence stretched. "Tell me." "Money. Initially." His voice was flat, professional. "He'd borrowed from one of our loan operations. Small amount. 15 million won. He couldn't pay it back. The interest compounded. By the time he died, it was closer to 50 million. And you went after his family. The organization did. I was sent to assess whether collection was possible." "To assess me, you mean?" "Yes." Jiyeon felt sick. "So everything, meeting me, dating me, that was all part of collecting a debt." "At first." Taehyun took a step toward her. She backed away. "At first, yes. I was supposed to determine if you had assets, if you could pay. You didn't. You were a student working 3 jobs just to survive, so I was supposed to scare you, make it clear what happened when people didn't pay. But you didn't." "No." "Why not?" "Because you looked at me like I was human." His voice cracked. "Everyone else looked at me and saw money or power or a threat, but you looked at me and saw someone who might help you carry your groceries home in the rain. So you decided to seduce me instead." "I decided to lie to my father." Taehyun's voice was harsh now. "I told him the debt was uncollectible, that pursuing you would cost more than we'd gain. I closed the file, made it disappear, but you kept seeing me. Because by then, He stopped. "Because by then, nothing else mattered." Jiyeon felt tears streaming down her face. "You should have told me." "I know. You should have told me from the beginning that you were only there because of my father's debt, that everything between us started as a transaction. It didn't stay that way. How do I know that?" She was shaking now. "How do I know any of it was real? Maybe keeping me close was easier than letting me know the truth. Maybe Minjun is just..." "Don't." Taehyun closed the distance between them. His hands caught her shoulders. "Don't you dare finish that sentence. Minjun has nothing to do with debts or obligations. He exists because we loved each other. Because for a few months, I let myself believe I could have something that wasn't built on blood and lies. But it was built on lies." Jiyeon tried to pull away. He held firm. "Everything was a lie, Taehyun. From the very first night. Not everything. How can I trust that? Because I canceled your father's debt." The words tore out of him. 6 years ago before you left, I went into the organization's database and erased it completely. Your father's name, his records, everything. I made it like he never existed." Jiyeon stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because I was in love with you." His voice was raw. "Because I couldn't stand the thought that our relationship had started because of something as meaningless as money. Because I needed what we had to be real." "And was it?" Jiyeon whispered. "Real?" Taehyun's hands slid from her shoulders to cup her face. His thumbs brushed away her tears with a gentleness that didn't match his reputation. "Every moment with you was the most real thing in my life," he said. "Every conversation, every laugh, every night I got to hold you and pretend I wasn't the person I am. That was real, Jiyeon. That's why when you left, I couldn't find you. Because I couldn't think straight. Couldn't function. I'd lost the only thing that made this life bearable. Jiyeon's breath caught. You never told me. I was going to. The day you disappeared, I was going to tell you about the debt, about everything, and ask you to marry me anyway. I had a ring. I had a plan to leave the family, to build something legitimate. I was going to... He stopped, jaw clenched. But you were gone. Jiyeon closed her eyes. I saw your engagement announcement. To Park Min-seo. It was the same day I found out I was pregnant. That wasn't my choice. My father arranged it. I was trying to find a way out when the situation resolved itself. Don't. Jiyeon's eyes snapped open. Don't sugarcoat it. Hana told me the truth. Min-seo was murdered, and you were probably involved. I wasn't. How do I know that? Because I have nothing to gain from lying to you anymore. His hands dropped. Min-seo's death was a suicide. A real one. She couldn't handle the life she was marrying into. The evidence supports it. But believe what you want. Everyone else does. The exhaustion in his voice was palpable. Jiyeon wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that somewhere under the crime and the violence and the impossible choices, there was still the man who'd taught her how to play Go, who'd made her laugh during midnight convenience store runs, who'd looked at her like she was something precious instead of disposable. But she was also a mother now, and mothers didn't get the luxury of wanting. I need you to leave, she said quietly. Jiyeon, please, I need time to process this. All of it. Taehyun nodded slowly. Can I come back? To see Minjun? I don't know. That's not fair. None of this is fair. Her voice rose. You lied to me for months. You built our relationship on a debt I didn't even know existed. And now you want access to my son. Our son. Because suddenly, you've decided you want to be a father. But what about next week? Next month? What happens when being a parent interferes with your business? What happens when Minjun asks too many questions about what you do? What happens when your world comes for him the way it came for me? Taehyun had no answer. Because they both knew. In that life, children were either shields or targets. And Minjun would be both. I'll protect him, Taehyun said finally. You can't promise that. I can try. Jiyeon shook her head. That's not good enough. She walked to the door, opened it. Taehyun stood in the middle of her small living room, this powerful man who could make entire organizations bow with a word, and looked utterly defeated. I meant what I said earlier, he told her. About loving you. That was real. That's still real. Jiyeon's hand tightened on the doorknob. Real doesn't matter if it's not safe. Then what does matter? Minjun. Only Minjun. Taehyun walked to the door, paused in the doorway. I'll wait, he said, for however long it takes. But I'm not disappearing again, Jiyeon. Minjun deserves to know his father. And whether you believe it or not, I deserve to know my son. He left. Jiyeon closed the door, locked it, slid down to sit on the floor with her back against the wood, and finally let herself fall apart. Because Taehyun was right about one thing. Minjun did deserve to know his father. But deserving and safety weren't the same thing. And Jiyeon had no idea how to give him both. Her phone buzzed. She pulled it out with shaking hands. Another message from Hana. He didn't tell you everything. The debt wasn't erased. It was transferred. Ask him who owns it now. Ask him what happens if you don't cooperate. Jiyeon stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then she threw the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall. In his room, Minjun slept, dreaming of spaceships and fathers who built things instead of destroying them. And Jiyeon sat alone on her floor, wondering if she'd just made the worst mistake of her life, or the only one that mattered. 3 days passed. Jiyeon didn't answer Taehyun's calls, didn't respond to his messages. But she watched the news obsessively, waiting for the fallout she knew was coming. It came on day 4. Kang Taehyun cancels high-profile engagement. Sources cite personal complications. The article was vague, diplomatic, but the photos told the real story. Hana leaving Taehyun's building with mascara-streaked cheeks, her family's black cars surrounding her like a funeral procession. Minjun noticed her distraction. Is my appa coming back? He asked one morning, playing with his cereal. Jiyeon's spoon froze. What makes you think that? Because you keep looking at your phone like you're waiting for something. 5 years old and already reading her better than she read herself. I don't know if he's coming back, Jiyeon admitted. Do you want him to? The question was too honest, too sharp. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. Unknown number.
If you stayed until the end, it's because this story stayed with you. What you heard here is just a fragment. The full experience lives in 30 complete audio stories, carefully told with every emotion, every secret, and every moment that couldn't be shared on YouTube. There are no ads, no interruptions, and you can listen anytime, anywhere, in total privacy. Scan the QR code on your screen now, or tap the link in the pinned comment, and discover what was never said.
Again. But this time, it wasn't Hana. Your apartment. Tonight, we need to talk about what Minjun is worth to us. Park family Jiyeon's blood turned to ice. Jiyeon called Taehyun. He answered on the first ring. They threatened him, she said without preamble. Hana's family. They sent me a message about Minjun. Silence. Then, pack a bag. I'm sending someone to get you. Both of you. I'm not running to Seoul. You're not running. You're surviving. His voice was steel. Hana's father doesn't forgive humiliation, Jiyeon. Canceling that engagement made him look weak. And weak men do desperate things. So what? I'm supposed to trust you now? After everything? No. You're supposed to trust that I won't let anyone hurt our son. The certainty in his voice broke through her resistance. How long? She whispered. A car will be there in 2 hours. Pack light. Don't tell anyone where you're going. What about Mrs. Park? Minjun's school? I'll handle it. He hung up. Jiyeon stared at her small apartment, this safe haven she'd built from nothing. Then she started packing. Minjun didn't understand why they were leaving. Didn't understand why his mother was crying while folding his favorite shirts. Are we going on an adventure, Iyama? Something like that, Jiyeon whispered. The car that arrived was bulletproof. Taehyun's penthouse was a fortress. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul. Security cameras in every corner. Men in black suits stationed at every entrance. Minjun thought it was a castle. Jiyeon thought it was a prison. You'll stay here until this is resolved, Taehyun said, showing her to a guest room twice the size of her Busan apartment. And when will that be? When the Park family understands that touching Minjun means war. That night, after Minjun fell asleep in silk sheets he'd never feel again, Jiyeon found Taehyun on the balcony. I looked into the debt, she said quietly. He didn't turn around. And Hana was right. It wasn't erased. It was transferred. To me. Taehyun's voice was flat. I own your father's debt now. I bought it from the organization 6 years ago. Why? So no one else could use it against you. Jiyeon's breath caught. That's not protection. That's ownership. Call it what you want. He finally faced her. But it kept you safe. Until now. Before Taehyun could respond, his phone rang. His face went white. What? Jiyeon demanded. What is it? Taehyun answered. Listened. Then slowly lowered the phone. Hana's dead, he said. They found her an hour ago. Single gunshot. Suicide note. Jiyeon's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. The note says she couldn't live with the shame of the cancelled engagement. Taehyun's voice was hollow. But it also says something else. What? He met her eyes. It says Minjun isn't my son. It says you lied. And it names someone else as his biological father. The floor disappeared beneath Jiyeon's feet. That's impossible. The note names my brother. Taehyun continued, his voice breaking. Minjun, the one who died 6 years ago. It says he was Minjun's real father, that you and he had an affair, that I've been raising another man's bastard. Jiyeon couldn't breathe. That's a lie. You know it's a lie. Do I? Taehyun's eyes were dark, empty, because suddenly I'm remembering things. The way my brother looked at you, the way he'd ask about you, the way he died, 3 weeks after you disappeared. Taehyun, no. Prove it, he whispered. Prove Minjun is mine. Is Minjun really Taehyun's son? Or his dead brother's? Did Hana kill herself? Or was she silenced? And who planted that suicide note? Episode 02 unlocks with 10 comments telling us who you think is Minjun's real father, 3,000 views to prove you're ready for the truth. Drop your theories below. Comment if you think Minjun is Taehyun's son. Comment if you think the brother is the real father. Comment if you think this is all a setup. The truth will destroy everything.